Hey, Treasure fans, how's it going? This is Jamieson O'Marr back with another injury update. Today, unfortunately, we'll be talking about exclusively Justin Herbert, his finger, the decisions that were made earlier today, including the need for surgery and his likely placement on IR and out for the rest of the season. So, very unfortunate loss for the Chargers, as we know. And I'm just going to get in today to more information for those who are interested about the decision making process about Justin Herbert's injury, what we know so far, a little bit into how these injuries are treated and how that could potentially impact his play in the future, and what to expect in terms of his rehab journey as we move forward in the seat with the rest of the season and into the offseason. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. Just want to quickly, recap what happened. So it happened, I believe, at the towards the end of the second quarter, right before halftime. Justin Herbert suffered this during, I believe, one of the many sacks he unfortunately underwent yesterday. Um, that later came out that he had X-rays. He was held out of the game. He was put into this finger splint. He made it very obvious that he was not wanting to demonstrate it, and he had it in his jacket like this for the remainder of the game while he was on the sidelines. Although you could see fairly clearly, one finger was extended in some type of splint, again, to just keep that, fracture from getting any worse. But it was, determined after the game that he would go seek additional recommendations and treatment, and then a decision would be made in terms of surgery versus non-surgery and things like that. So it came out today that he met with a few specialists. The decision was made from surgery, and I believe that surgery did actually occur today. That's December 12th. So what types of things are players or and physicians talking about when they're kind of deciding whether to operate on this? So let's back up a little bit and just talk a little bit about finger anatomy. So I'm going to get into the weeds here for those interested, but I think it's pretty cool stuff. So we're going to talk about it. So you could have a lot of injuries to the finger, especially for quarterbacks. You could have I'll break them up into two distinct regions here. You either have soft tissue injuries or bony injuries or fractures to the bone itself. So soft tissue injuries are something, for example, like Matt Stafford had one of these aggravated a thumb UCL. I forgot exactly what the injury was for Russell Wilson. Drew Brees had one of these injuries, but you have a lot of tendons in your fingers, and those are important. Your muscles attached to the tendons, and then there's lots of different lever actions. So, for example, if you hyperextend a finger in a certain way, or you hit a hand on a helmet or things like that, you could actually rupture those tendons. Now, obviously, very bad because even though nothing structurally is broken in terms of the bone itself, your finger can often be locked in a certain position. And depending on which tendon you hurt, you get things with names of like mallet finger and things like that, because fingers will get stuck. And no matter how much you try, you're not able to bend it because you've ruptured the tendon that actuates that finger. So that's not what Justin Herbert had, as far as we know. He had a bony injury, and it's described as a finger and right index finger specifically. So that's your right pointer finger. Um, when people think of the fingers, you think of traditionally the phalanges. You got three of them: a distal, a middle, and a proximal. So that's three bones in your finger. You also have the metacarpals. Much less common to injure these ones here in the middle of your hand. They're just harder to actually fracture unless you get tackled in a particular manner. And those fractures is what we'll talk about today. About what's the decision making process, and what will what, for example, what things Justin Herbert had to think about and his medical team had to think about. So thankfully, no soft tissue injuries. We're talking about bony things. So in broad strokes, we think of fractures as either stable or unstable. And the distinction there is without further treatment, will that fracture get worse? In just day to day life without protection, will that fracture, get worse and become more unstable? Or, is it the fracture in a particular way that even with movement, we're not worried about it displacing and it can heal in that position? And that's kind of the broad distinction of whether we have to surgically intervene or not. So as you can see on the top here, I just listed three types of fractures in the I believe the proximal phalange and all of these ones. So you can have fractures with what they call the head or the most distal aspect into that joint surface. So these bones join, and you can have various levels. A very simple fracture, for example, non-displaced. That's something that might be able to be treated without surgery. You just got to be careful, protect it, and let it heal, but don't need to necessarily intervene. Versus like a very comminuted fracture that's very broken, lots of little pieces. something like that's likely not to be stable. So you need to intervene and have surgery there. And that can, these fractures can occur in the head. They can occur in the mid shaft. This is an example of like a spiral fracture or a transverse fracture here going down the length of the bone, or in the base of the bone here. This one's like not quite in the joint, right on the edge of the joint, pure transverse fracture right across the bone. So, bones can break in hundreds of different ways. That's why orthopedics is kind of interesting, because every single way you have to think about, how am I going to put that back together? And so, for Justin Herbert's sake, the decision was made to have surgery. So we don't know exactly. And these are not Justin's X-rays; those are protected information. These are just all hypothetical examples. But his fracture was in such a way that the surgery was recommended and performed. And this is an example of the various ways you can treat this. So again, the whole thing is putting the bone back in its place, allowing it to heal. Ideally, with as least intervention as possible. The less soft tissue damage you do, the kind of smaller, minimally invasive you do, the quicker the patient heals, and the better the outcomes in general. So, for example, in this one, this is an example of a fracture in the middle phalange of the finger. It was in the head around the joint surface. These injuries, you tend to have to be a little bit more aggressive with treating, because if you don't help restore that natural joint surface, the odds of complications in terms of pain and loss of mobility in the future are higher. So in this one, they were able to fix it with a single tiny screw. Again, you're using very small screws and to just reapproximate the fracture. So they go across the fracture, that locks that in, and allows that to heal in place. Eventually, these things can be removed, although, if it's not painful, generally patients don't have them removed and taken out. But you can also repair these things in different ways. So here's an example of using a small wires, actually. So um, no actually implanted hardware. These wires go into the finger. You kind of cross them again to have maximum stability, and they actually come out of the skin. So you allow patients to heal. You pull those wires out again, and then in this situation, for fractures that are not as set, in need of super stability, you can do something like this. And then once you take those wires out, there's no retained hardware, so no issues with hurting tendons or anything like that in the future, and they heal quite well. You can use a plate, again, plate and screws. You just make sure those bones are in position, or you can, like in this first example, use a single screw alone to hold that bone in place. Again, the whole point here, making sure the bone is in an anatomical alignment, it heals well, and allows for return to play in the future without any major issues. So we don't know exactly what type of injury Justin had, but we do know he had surgery. So it's likely he has some combination of pins, screws, plates in there to help it heal properly. But let's talk about what that means for his long-term play. So outcomes. If he was not a quarterback, a lot of these injuries, especially if it's non-operative, especially if it's like on a non-dominant hand. For example, let's say Justin played linebacker. That's very likely that he could even have surgery and go back to playing in anywhere like 2 weeks. He just put his hand in the club, some sort of protective thing like that. That's allowed in football, and he would, be able to play. But because he's a quarterback, because that's his throwing hand, he needs to be able to grip the ball. That's why we saw him being placed on IR and not being able to play for the rest of the season, because the typical return timeline for these injuries is around 2 to 4 weeks. He'll be able to pull his finger out of a cast or however it's immobilized and get to full mobility, so move it around and things like that. And usually by the 6 to 8 week mark, he's back to normal. So he's doing whatever he needs to do, full weightlifting, starting throwing, all that stuff. So I don't imagine that this is going to have any long-term issues. He had surgery quickly. It's going to heal properly. There's always risks of complications like infection. The fact that they call it non-union if the bone doesn't heal together, or malunion that it heals in kind of a weird alignment. That's not makes it difficult to play. Those are all very low risks. And because he had surgery so quickly, it's likely that he's going to be just fine. So I expect him to be on this 2 to 4 week till mobility, full movement, and then by 6 to 8 weeks, back to normal life. I don't expect them to have any long-term issues, which is good for the future. And the Chargers, I think, made the right decision. Justin wants to play. He's a competitor. It's a very admirable trait. But in terms of the organization, the long-term benefit is not to rush him back from an injury like this, especially given where the Chargers are in their season. It is, I think, just important to know this is the second season that's ended in this type of surgery. So he had labrum surgery on his non-throwing shoulder last season, right after the season was over. So this is the second season that ended this way. The Chargers' offensive line obviously had a lot of issues after Corey Linsley went out. There was lots of pressure on Justin Herbert. He's had lots of balls batted down at the line. There's a lot of things where he can have contact and injury potentially occur. So that's something that the Chargers will have to be wary about moving forward. Um, and and something that the Chargers will likely have to make decisions about with potentially, and amid a whole bunch of other decisions they're going to be making with regards to the GM, with regards to the coaching staff and structure and things like that. So, in summary, I don't expect Justin Herbert to have any long-term issues from this. He had surgery; he's out for the year. It's the best thing that's possible for him. Um, and we'll have to go from there. So I'll keep having injury updates as the season kind of ends, especially with regard to certain players that might, injuries that might be a little bit more uh, important for long-term development. It's going to be a big offseason for the Chargers as well. There's been a lot of decisions that need to be made. And if they have any injury aspects to them, I'll try to help contribute some information with the rest of the team. So thank you, Charger fans, for tuning in for the course of the season. Hopefully you stick with us here at Guilty as Charged as the weeks go on and into the off season. There'll be plenty of content that the team is putting together. And again, if you have any questions with regards to this video, feel free to leave it in the comments or tweet at me or X at me and whatever the kids call it these days at Chargers Medical. I'm always happy to answer and chat with people there. So, unfortunately, another injury update. The Chargers are on the right path in terms of the season. Justin Herbert's going to be fine. It's just unfortunate that he has to suffer this injury. But if we're looking at the glass half full, there are things like potential draft picks, having a higher draft pick in the future, Easton Stick getting actual meaningful playing time, being able to see what we have in the backup and things like that. So there are some positives here. Let's try to focus on those. But until next time, see you later.